Alright, so this is the video for the Ag and Bioinformatics group, and our task was to train a neural net to classify leaves. Now, these leaves belong to 8 different disease classes, from 0 to 8, 0 being healthy, 8 being the most diseased, or exhibiting the most symptoms of disease. And we're supposed to, like I said, train a neural net to classify these leaves into the different categories. And then eventually at the end, we were supposed to train it on a picture of a canopy. And here's an example picture of what I mean by canopy. So a top-down picture of several leaves, and then see how our classifier performs on that. So I think the best way to start is at the end. So at the end, our desired output, what we wanted to do was train several predictors and apply to patches of the image and color the image based on what class the classifiers decided that the leaf belonged to. So it made a little bit more sense for us to work backwards from the end. And the first obstacle that we identified was that if segmentation on leaves, as in determining which part of the picture is a leaf, was a little bit outside of our capabilities. We looked into RCNNs, but it was a little bit too difficult for, we weren't able to implement it in time. So the next best thing that we thought to do was to just take smaller patches of the image. So you see here, it's a little bit more obvious here. Take little patches of the image and feed it to the neural network and assign it values based on whatever the neural net decides. So the first obstacle was how, if we were just to put the neural net on the canopy data, it would not be able to identify like these background things. It would misclassify them. So the first step that we did was to actually create a 10th class, and that's what you'll notice here in leaf data. We have a 10th class here now, class 9, and it's just parts of the background that have been stripped away. We did HSV segmenting on them because we reasoned that our test samples were HSV segmented as well. And so we want to replicate the training, or we want to make the new class data look as much like the previous class data as much as possible. So if we look here, we start by defining a HSV extraction function to take in an image and threshold the image based on these HSV values. We were playing around with the values by hand. We didn't really do any quantitative analysis on which thresholds were the best. We just chose these ones. Looking back now, there definitely is some work to be done in choosing a better threshold. And so this function takes in an image and spits out the masked image, and we just train it on the directory. And it creates this new directory of first off, the masked canopies. So we start off with the canopies. So we have the canopies here, and then we're going to mask them. So now this is the resulting image here. Something we could have done is use the color correction to help guide our thresholding, and that's definitely an area of improvement. So the next part is we just take patches from around the border of the picture. And so we just did 64 by 64 patches just to mimic the length of the rest of the input set. And we just took patches from around the border of the image and saved it to the output directory. So it's not here anymore. Actually, here it was. So once we took the canopy, for each canopy picture, we took a border, took patches around the border and saved it to this background noise class. So we ended up with 2,660 patches of noise from each of the 10 data sets. So we got 266 patches from each of the 10 canopies. And from there, we went ahead and split that total noise, just total patches into a training and a testing set. So we did that by just randomly sampling from those images 80% into the training set, 20% into the testing set. And that's how our new class, what we're calling class 9, that's how that was created. Something else we could have done was to, again, looking back on it now, these images are very large. So 64 by 64 is very, very, very small. We could have easily, because technically I only took the outermost 64 by 64 rim around the image, I could have gone in a few more. So maybe I take it the first 4 rows around the border of the image, and that gives us a more varied representation of the background noise here. Okay, so once we create that noise class, where am I? Okay, so once we create that noise class, now we're going to experiment with different bounding box sizes. So we just took the simple approach of just choosing our bounding box size and centering and taking that bounding box centered on the image. So a 64, if you take a 32 by 32 image, it's just the subimage centered, a 32 by 32 subimage centered on the original image. So we experimented with so we have the 64 by 64, the 32 by 32, and the 48 by 48 subimages. And we trained different networks on it. So to train the networks, we use this CNN trainer. Now, sorry, skipping around a little bit. So as part of training a network, we wanted to do the data augmentation. Keras has something that's really helpful in this regard called the image data generator. And what it does, it takes a directory of images. Well, first you tell the image data generator what transformations you want to do to the original image. So if we're rescaling them, we're sharing it, we're zooming it, we're flipping it randomly. And we could train this data generator on a whole directory, and that augments the data on the fly. So we have a data generator and a validation generator. So this function, this find best CNN function, it takes in an input shape in the directories, and it creates the generators for the training and the testing. And we have a selection of hidden hyperparameters to optimize. scikit-learn has the grid search CV function, which helps optimize, or it makes it so we can, it iterates through all the different combinations of hyperparameters to find the optimal model, but we couldn't make that play nicely with the data generator functions. So we had to write our own function to do this, and that's all that find best CNN is doing. So CNN is taking different combinations of these hyperparameters and passing it to the build CNN function. And the build CNN function automatically makes different configurations of the neural network depending on what input parameters are passed. And you can take a look at it here in the CNN trainer notebook. We didn't actually run it in a notebook, we ran it in a script on the GPU to find the best performances. And here's how that might work. So this does take a while, but we just have the saved. So we have the saved models for each of the best CNNs for the different bounding box sizes. So from here, we've trained the models, got the best validation scores, the best set of hyperparameters, and now finally we're going to use these models to predict on the canopy pictures. So first what we do is we use this function here, canopy predictions. So it takes the bounding box size and it takes chunks out of the image, you can see here. So for the 64 by 64 network, we take 64 by 64 chunks of the canopy image, pass it to the network, and get a classification for that pixel, or sorry, that box. And we save it to a NumPy array. And we do this for the different bounding box sizes. So this is the 64 by 64, the 48 by 48, and the 32 by 32. So once we have all those predictions, we have our function color with predictions. So instead of visualizing it as a, well, because it's unlabeled data, I couldn't really think of any better way to visualize it than doing this sort of heat map, I guess. Not really heat map, but overlaying the visual information on top of the original image. So a failure on my part is that I didn't really choose my gradient too carefully. So I don't know what the different values, it's not quite clear to me what the different values represent. I know that greener values are healthier and browner values are less healthy. So there's that regard. What's interesting though is that it seems that the 64 by 64 network model and the 32 by 32 network model are generally in agreement. They seem to classify the plant as generally healthy. However, the 48 by 48 model is interesting because it seems to classify the plant as significantly less healthy. Other things that I would, so that's pretty much how we did on the project. You could run this function, this color with predictions function on the different canopy pictures with the different models and see what happens. But the, yeah, so like I said, the biggest thing is I think we could do different size or sample for the noise class more carefully, and also to choose, like maybe instead of taking 64 by 60, like bounding box size chunks from the image, take larger chunks from the image, like maybe like 200, 300, like that scale, like 200 by 300 chunks, and scale it back down to fit into the model, and then classify it based on that. So instead of like classifying a little tiny patch of a leaf, we're classifying bigger chunks of the leaf. All right, so that's it for our project. Thank you.